Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, preemptive like, let's learn, shall we? I was gonna watch this video yesterday and I got distracted by other history hit videos. Let's go.
It was one of history's most decisive clashes.
Dan Snow.
The first battle ever where the result was decided not on the land nor on the sea, but in the air. In the summer of 1940, Britain battled...
It's crazy how we live so close to the invention of the airplane. That's got to be as significant as the invention of the boat. And it happened like 100 years ago. A little more than that, but still, that's just crazy.
For survival against Hitler's war machine. The result would define the course of the Second World War. It was known simply as the Battle of Britain.
I always get confused with Battle for Britain, Battle of Britain.
June 1940.
France falls.
Britain and its empire stood alone. The rest of Western Europe had fallen. On the 18th of June, France surrendered to German forces, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill gave a speech that was as prescient as it was inspirational.
What General Weygand has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
Two days previously, Adolf Hitler had issued a directive on preparations for a landing operation against England. His forces now prepared for an invasion. But the German Navy had been decimated in the previous year's battle for Norway. Britain's Royal Navy was still the most powerful on Earth. Any invasion fleet would be destroyed as it crossed the Channel. The only way it might succeed was if the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, achieved total domination of the skies above the Channel and formed an iron dome above the fleet.
You know, we say, you know, America obviously was fighting, eventually defeated. We call it the you know, all of it a world war, but I really feel like it was two separate wars, like one in the Pacific and one in Europe. But clearly they were connected, and they were, you know, Japan was allied with Germany and Italy, and the U.S. was allied with France and Great Britain and the Soviet Union. And we all know how, or most of us I think know how much the Soviet Union was crucial to winning the Second World War. But if Britain fell, what do? You're not invading Western Europe if you don't have that giant your only choice is then to continue to supply Russia. I'm assuming like what happened with a lot of French soldiers. I think a lot of French soldiers, you make it to Britain and form the head up the French resistance. And I'm assuming the same would happen, except you'd probably British and the remaining French would probably move to America to continue the resistance in the same way the French did in Britain. But you're not invading without the giant land aircraft carrier that was the UK in preparation for D-Day. And so you'd have to go from the Mediterranean and aid Russia in the east. And who knows how that would work out. I mean, you have to go through the Alps, and I feel like it's a lot more defendable for Germany to defend against an Italian invasion than a French invasion. I'm not really sure about that. You definitely argue with me there. But it definitely such a pivotal moment. And if Britain fell, then...
Dive bombers could then pound the intercepting British ships, and this might just give the invaders a chance to get across. Any invasion attempt therefore depended on wresting control of the skies from the Royal Air Force. As a first step, Hitler turned to his air force to knock Britain out of the war, preferably by a campaign of bombing that would destroy the British economy and the will to go on fighting, or if that failed, to smash the RAF and create the necessary preconditions for an invasion. In mid-July, the Luftwaffe stepped up attacks on British coastal shipping. The Battle of Britain had begun. The task of defeating the Luftwaffe fell to the RAF. In early skirmishes, it became clear that certain aircraft, like the Defiant, were totally outclassed by the German fighter, the Messerschmitt 109. But the Hawker Hurricane and the newer Supermarine Spitfire proved up to the job. There were twice as many Hurricanes in the RAF as Spitfires at the start of the battle. They were quick to produce and easy to fly. But they were slower than the Messerschmitt. The Spitfire, however, was very evenly matched with the best German fighter.
Among fighters, the fastest...
What do you guys think would have happened if Britain did fall? And say it happened before Pearl Harbor. And so... Because if Pearl Harbor happened and then Germany declared war on the U.S. once Japan attacked, like they did in the actual timeline, then there would be, I'm sure, a lot more fighting in northern Africa and the Middle East and just around the Mediterranean. And I wonder if maybe the U.S. would ally with Germany or something like that. I have no idea. I'm saying prior to Pearl Harbor, because once they were attacked by Pearl Harbor, Japan is an ally of Germany. Germany declares war. Then obviously they're not going to. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think they would focus on Japan first then and try and squash Japan and just put up as much resistance in the Middle East as you and around the northern Africa, Middle East as you can? Maybe attempt to invade Lower Italy, but if Germany doesn't have to worry about a front opening up from an invasion into northern France or just across the English Channel or wherever, then once you have Britain, I mean, is America going to launch an invasion over the Atlantic with no stopping point? How do you do that? And so now they just have to worry about Russia. And I'm assuming they would try and secure victory in northern Africa and the Middle East, and then try and invade the Soviet Union. But I'm assuming if the Americans want to resist against Germany and Japan, would they go against Japan first, and then just interesting to think
in the
about.
world today is probably the Among fighters, the fastest in the world today is probably the Spitfire. 8 machine guns are spaced along its wings. These are operated by a button under the pilot's finger. The German armor has to suffer a simultaneous stream of fire, which, focusing on a point 250 yards ahead at a rate of 9,600 bullets a minute, can soar through steel plate. Our Spitfire has a top speed of 387 miles an hour. It travels 100 yards in about half a second. This gives it an advantage of about 100 miles an hour over the bomber, which cruises at 220.
The British aircraft were fit for purpose, and there would be enough of them.
I like that he said 100 miles in about a second, and that it's easy for my American brain because that's like a football field in about a second. It's pretty fast.
Appointed Lord Beaverbrook fit for purpose, and there would be enough of them. Churchill had appointed Lord Beaverbrook as the head of his new Ministry of Aircraft Production. Beaverbrook, a campaigning press baron, drove up the numbers of planes produced. The problem was trained pilots. Requirements were loosened as more pilots were rushed onto the front line to replace those who perished.
There were 18 aircraft in the squadron, of which we would fly 12 as a formation. Sometimes at the end of the day, having flown 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, 5 times a day, we'd be down to 3 aircraft. And then by 12 o'clock, 1400 hours the next day, we were back to square one with the business of replacing aircraft. The system we had was absolutely first class. Mainly due, not entirely due to him, the little Canadian fella who did Daily Express.
On August the 13th, the Germans launched Adlerangriff, or Eagle Attack. More than 1,400 German aircraft crossed the Channel, but they met fierce RAF resistance. German losses were serious. 45 aircraft were shot down, for the loss of only 13 British fighters. The next day, out of 500 attacking aircraft, around 75 were shot down. The British lost 34. The third day saw 70 German losses against 27 British. During this decisive phase, the RAF were winning the Battle of Attrition.
So I wonder how much of that is due to just better piloting and just better fighter pilots, and how much has to do with the Germans having to worry about dogfights and anti-aircraft guns, and having to return home. Maybe they don't. Or,
The camera was present and actually in the fighter planes. This is sensational stuff taken by pilots in action. Imagine yourself sitting on the tail of this Heinkel, giving him all you've got. Smoke streaming from him, he's in a bad way, but you won't see him crack up because the camera gun, being geared to the machine gun, stops as the Heinkel falls out of sight. Now you're chasing another Heinkel, and this time the camera too gets the victim. A Messerschmitt 110. A Dornier 17. The Royal Air Force takes these films to record how various enemy types stand up to the fire of our fighters. Apparently they don't. Watch this Junkers 87.
As the fighting intensified during August...
This must have seemed so futuristic at the time, seeing this stuff, even if it was a few years after the war that you saw this. Because, again, planes aren't old, especially in this time, and... 40 years prior to a little less than 40 years, 30 something years prior to World War One or World War Two, and then even less than that of serious, air combat in warfare, and just like seeing this as a civilian, like people up in the sky, like, and you're actually seeing them fight the planes, must have been a crazy feeling.
As the fighting intensified during August, pilots flew 4 or 5 sorties a day. They came close to physical and mental exhaustion.
2 brothers, actually, who I've been researching recently, who were flying Hurricanes with Treble 1 Squadron in 1940, flying from Croydon, the Fisher brothers. And so there was Anthony and Basil Fisher, and they were flying together on the same squadron. How they ended up on the same squadron, I'm not really sure, but these 2 brothers were flying side by side, and poor Basil gets shot down. His brother sees him shot down, sees his brother bail out, and actually sees his brother's parachute catch fire, and watches him fall to his death. And in the squadron diary that evening, it actually says, Flying Officer Anthony Fisher has been sent away on sick leave with a nervous breakdown. Well, hardly surprising, really. So there was a lot of nervous exhaustion, physical exhaustion, just the anxiety of waiting for that telephone to ring to go off on another scramble. It was, it was pretty hellish.
At one point, General Ismay, Churchill's principal military assistant, was watching the battle as it was being plotted in a fighter command operations room. He later recalled, there had been heavy fighting throughout the afternoon, and at one moment every single squadron in the group was engaged. There was nothing in reserve, and the map table showed new waves of attackers crossing the coast. I felt sick with fear. But the fact that Ismay was able to watch the battle unfolding at all was a miracle of planning. He was witnessing an operation that gave Britain a unique advantage. The waves of German bombers that Ismay was seeing on the plotting table were being detected by a brand new, top-secret British weapon: radar. Invented and installed in the months leading up to the battle, radar detected the German aircraft as they flew over the channel. Then thousands of observers on the ground confirmed the radar signal by calling in their sightings of enemy aircraft. This information was filtered to operations rooms, who then sent out orders to airfields to intercept the raiders. On receiving these orders, the pilots would scramble. The whole process, at its most efficient, could take less than 20 minutes. Invented by the Fighter Command Chief Sir Hugh Dowding, it was the world's first integrated air defence system, and it's now replicated all over the globe. It saw British planes and pilots used with maximum efficiency, only deploying against an actual enemy raid. The Germans, meanwhile, had little understanding of the British defensive system, in particular the role of radar, and they didn't concentrate attacks on radar stations. It was an expensive mistake.
Had they actually understood really that attacking the radar stations, the German perception was that attacking the radar stations was exceptionally difficult because they never saw any of the masts fall down, which they didn't. But what they didn't realise was that the radar stations they did attack and put off the air, albeit temporarily, like Ventnor, some of those radar stations were put off the air at least temporarily because the infrastructure was damaged, electric cables, whatever it might be. That would have been a game changer, because if they'd have just carried on attacking the radar stations, perhaps rather than the airfields even, then the RAF effectively would have been blind. That was a big part of the reason for the failure, if you like, during the Battle of France, because the French Air Force, and we were flying with the French Air Force, had no command and control structure. So it was just a case of patrolling, flying up and down, and hoping to find the Germans. If we'd have been blinded in terms of the radar stations being knocked out, which would have been possible had the Germans kept at it, but they didn't really fully appreciate what damage they were doing or not doing, that would have definitely been a big game changer.
The British also had other advantages. German fighters were operating at the limit of their fuel tanks, and whenever German pilots were shot down, they became prisoners of war. British pilots could land on friendly territory and hop straight back into a replacement aircraft. When Flight Sergeant Dennis Robinson was shot down near Wareham, he was quickly delivered by locals to the pub, given a few drams of whiskey and the afternoon off, before flying several sorties the next day.
Different breed of people, Jesus Christ. I would like to
August-
think, I would like to think I would rise to an occasion if I was in war for this time, but I don't know. I don't know. Part of me thinks I would just run, but I'd imagine when it's the death of your country. I just say I get almost so numb to watching so many videos that I forget just the amount of bravery you have to just get into this machine and know very likely you could die. Just got to stop and realize that every now and then.
War on, the RAF was suffering as incessant German raids wore down ground and air crew.
We lost half the squadron of 12 aircraft in about 2 minutes. They were all shot down by fighters because as we attacked the bombers, which we were briefed to do as our main task, we would be attacked by German fighters behind us, sitting 100 yards behind us and shooting us down like pigeons.
On the 20th of August, Churchill made a speech, hoping to bolster the determination of the political class and the general public alike.
The gratitude of every home in our island, in our empire, and indeed throughout the world, except in the abodes of the guilty, goes out to the British airmen who, undaunted by odds, unwearied in their constant challenge and mortal danger, are turning the tide of the world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
The British were being helped by their enemy's poor intelligence. Germany's network of spies in Britain was compromised. They lacked a realistic picture of the strength of the RAF. They failed to focus on the right targets with the right intensity. Nonetheless, the RAF was terribly stretched when suddenly, at the start of September, the German High Command made a catastrophic mistake. In late August, Churchill had ordered an RAF raid on Berlin. A few civilians had been killed and no targets of significance had been hit. Yet Hitler was enraged and ordered his Luftwaffe to unleash their full force on the enemy capital. On the 7th of September, the Luftwaffe switched their focus and struck London to force the British government to capitulate. The Blitz had begun.
The original plan was to shoot us down in the air, attack our airfields or the points at which the aircraft were built. But he changed the plan because Berlin was bombed by just a few aircraft, almost by mistake. It is said was their undoing. They changed the plan. What you don't do in war is change the plan in the middle.
London would burn, and its people endure terrible hardships. But as the fighting moved away from the airfields, Fighter Command was able to rebuild its strength. Runways were prepared. Pilots could grab some rest. On the 15th of September, a week of continuous bombing of London reached a climax as 500 German bombers, accompanied by more than 600 fighters, pounded London from morning to dusk. The RAF rose to the challenge. Over 60 German aircraft were destroyed. Another 20 were badly mauled. The Royal Air Force was clearly not on its knees. The British people were not demanding peace. The British government remained determined to fight.
All the world that is still free marvels at the composure and fortitude with which the citizens of London are facing and surmounting the great ordeal to which they are subjected, the end of which, or the severity of which, cannot yet be foreseen. It is a message of good cheer to our fighting forces on the seas, in the air, and in our waiting armies, in all their posts and stations, that we send them from this capital city. They know that they have behind them a people who will not flinch or weary of the struggle, hard and protracted though it will be. but that we shall rather draw from the heart of suffering itself the means of inspiration and survival, and of a victory won not only for ourselves, but for all, a victory won not only for our own time, but for the long and better days that are to come.
Hitler's attempt to knock Britain out of the war through air power had failed. His plan to defeat the RAF before invading had failed. Now autumn gales threatened. The invasion would have to be now or never. Two days after the defeat of the 15th of September, Hitler postponed the invasion. Over the next few weeks, it was quietly abandoned. It was Hitler's first decisive defeat. Frustrated by the Channel, the Royal Navy, and the RAF, Hitler decided to turn east. The defeat of the Soviet Union looked to be an easier proposition. The German blitz against UK cities and industries would continue, but the RAF had triumphed. The Luftwaffe lost nearly 2,000 planes during the night. The RAF, around 1,500. These included the aircraft from Bomber Command sent on suicidally dangerous missions to bomb targets such as the invasion barges gathered in the Channel ports. 1,500 British and Allied aircrew were killed. Young men from Britain and its empire, but also Poland, the Czech Republic, American volunteers, and others. Compared to the gigantic later battles of the Second World War, the numbers were small. The RAF fighter pilots have been immortalized as the few. But the impact was huge. Britain remained committed to the destruction of the Third Reich. It would supply the Soviet Union with vital intelligence and material support. It would rearm, rebuild, and act as a base for the Allied nations to bomb the essential war industries of the Third Reich and to eventually launch the liberation of Western Europe. Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel.
Thanks, Dan.
You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out.
It's a great video, as always, from History Hit. I love watching these videos. Although I don't think it would have made the German victory inevitable if Britain were to fall, but I think that it is just as pivotal, or as, you know, as say something like the Battle of Stalingrad, or where far more people died. But I mean, if you disagree, please let me know in the comments and stuff, or any questions I asked. Also, I would love to hear any answers in the comments. You guys are really good with that. But it would have knocked out a very possible, obviously, which ended up being what happened, invasion into France over the English Channel, and would have allowed Germany to kind of turn its back to that area of Europe, that flank, now that it had it secured. I mean, and would Germany have still lost? Maybe, but the war would have happened in a very different manner, obviously, and it was undoubtedly an enormous pivotal moment that if these guys failed, it would have enormous negative impacts on the Allied war effort, for sure. Very interesting. Love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Again, would appreciate any comments. You guys are super good. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Would love for you to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next video. Bye.